All that he has given me, I lose nothing, but raise it up, holds the sun, and day. Amen. Again, my topic is just bread of heaven, bread of heaven. Amen. When Jesus began to challenge them about the reason they wanted to see him, it was because of food. And so they began to say that Moses gave us manna. What signs will you do? Because they were always looking for a sign. Right. Show us a sign. Give us a sign. What sign do you do that will help us or make us believe you? How many of you know Jesus don't need to make somebody believe him? It is what he said because it is what he said. Right. That's right. And so Moses gave them manna, or God did, in the wilderness. And they received this manna. If you remember the story, they received manna every day while they were in the wilderness. And they only got what they needed for that day. Right. They were not allowed to get more than what they needed. And if they got more than what they needed and saved it to the next day, they found worms instead of bread. Right. They found worms instead of manna. And they, on the sixth day, was supposed to collect twice as much on the sixth day, so that they would not have to do any work on the seventh day. Right. So how many of you know it won't turn to won't turn to worms when you do what God says do? That's right. God says collect twice as much on the sixth day. So they collected twice as much on the sixth day because they were not supposed to work on the Sabbath day. Yeah. And then when they entered the promised land, the manna stopped. And they began to eat the produce of the land. And yet, although this was manna that came from heaven, or came from God, some said it was angels' food. I don't know, but it was some kind of bread, some kind of cake-like bread. Right. But it stopped the moment they entered the promised land. That's right. And so that was on the Moses side. So when Jesus says, but I am the real bread, I'm the real deal, I'm the real thing, and I came from God, I came out of heaven. And this caused a disturbance among them because, again, they were saying, how can this man say he came from heaven? Aren't his parents Mary and Joseph? So how can he say that he came out of heaven? So it was very difficult for them to believe what he had said. But I want you to know that Jesus is the bread of life. Yes, he is. And Jesus did come from heaven, and God sent him from heaven as the bread of life. And you'll find those verses where he refers to himself as the bread of life in verse 35, verse 48, and verse 51. He says, I'm the living bread. In other words, the manna that you ate was inanimate, but I'm a living, breathing bread. And so Jesus